ever signed a contract that could last a lifetime. Well, in the Philippines, saying I do means exactly that.
Mm.
You sent us this interesting YouTube video breaking down Philippine marriage law, and it really got me thinking. How does a country rooted in tradition navigate the complexities of marriage in the modern age?
It's a fascinating dance between cultural expectations and the letter of the law, that's for sure. This video is from Basic Philippine Law and Jurisprudence, and it seems to be a go-to resource for anyone looking for clarity on this very subject.
Yeah, and judging by the comments, it's not just law students tuning in. It seems like everyone from those about to tie the knot to those already hitched are looking for insights. So let's dive into the heart of it. What actually constitutes a marriage in the eyes of Philippine law?
Well, it's more than just a celebration or a social agreement. At its core, marriage in the Philippines is legally defined as a binding contract, a special contract, as the video points out.
A special contract.
Yeah.
That makes it sound almost exclusive.
In a way, it is. Unlike other contracts where you can hash out terms and conditions, Philippine law sets very clear boundaries around marriage. The idea of negotiating an end date, for instance, is simply out of the question.
So much for those trial marriage contracts, then. This really emphasizes the until death do us part aspect, doesn't it?
Precisely. The law upholds the permanence of marriage, and this concept of a lifelong union is deeply ingrained in the legal framework.
Okay, so we've established that this is serious business, not just a whimsical agreement. The video then breaks down the requirements for a valid marriage into two categories: conventional and formal. It seems like tripping up on either could spell trouble.
Imagine it like constructing a building. The essential requirements form the foundation. First, you have legal capacity, which covers age 18 years old is the minimum in the Philippines gender, which as it stands now means marriage is between a man and a woman and no close blood relations. You also need freely given consent, meaning no one is being coerced or pressured into the marriage.
So those are the non-negotiables, the bedrock of any marriage in the Philippines. Then what are the formal requirements? Are we talking about making sure the calligraphy on the marriage certificate is up to par?
Thankfully, aesthetics aren't part of the legal equation. Formal requirements are more about ensuring the process has been followed to the letter. This includes the authority of the solemnizing officer, remember, no DIY marriages here. A valid marriage license is crucial, although there are exceptions, we can get to those later, and of course, a properly conducted marriage ceremony with witnesses present.
These steps seem to be about demonstrating to the state that this is a legitimate union, not just a spur-of-the-moment decision.
Exactly. It's about ensuring transparency and adherence to a process that's been established to uphold the sanctity of marriage.
The video highlights the weight of these requirements by outlining what can happen if they're ignored, using terms like void and voidable.
Yeah.
It seems like these distinctions could make or break a marriage's legal standing. Can you elaborate on the difference between the two?
Absolutely. A void marriage is deemed invalid from the get-go as if it never happened. This generally stems from a violation of the essential requirements we discussed earlier. The video cites the case of Oka versus Perez, where a judge performed a marriage without diligently confirming all the prerequisites were met. This case underscores the immense responsibility placed upon the solemnizing officer. They are the gatekeepers, ensuring the foundation of the marriage is solid.
They are, in a sense, making sure no one is building their marital house on shaky ground. So what constitutes avoidable marriage, then?
Avoidable marriage is considered valid until challenged in court. These usually arise from defects in the formal requirements we discussed, rather than the essential ones. For example, if it's later proven that one party was coerced into consent, the marriage could be deemed voidable.
So in essence, the marriage has a crack in its foundation, and it's up to the courts to decide if that crack is significant enough to warrant dismantling the entire structure.
A very apt analogy. And to illustrate this, the video brings up a rather compelling case: Perfecto versus Idira. This case involved a judge who was already in a legally recognized civil marriage, but then proceeded to enter into a religious marriage with another individual, without the first marriage being dissolved, of course.
That sounds complicated, to say the least. Was the second marriage not considered valid because it lacked a marriage license?
It's even more nuanced than that. The crux of the matter was that the priest who conducted the religious ceremony didn't have the legal authority to solemnize marriages. Even though it was a religious ceremony, it didn't hold water legally.
That's a stark reminder that not just anyone can officiate a wedding if you want it to be legally binding. Choose your officiant wisely, folks. Speaking of important choices, the video devotes a significant amount of time to the infamous marriage license. What makes this seemingly simple document so crucial?
Think of the marriage license as the state's official stamp of approval. Their way of saying, we've reviewed your application, everything seems to be in order, you may proceed. It represents their vested interest in this union. Remember, the license is inherently tied to your habitual residence, meaning you can't simply hop jurisdictions to circumvent the law.
So, no eloping to a whimsical island and expecting the marriage to be recognized back home then? It reinforces the idea that this isn't just a private agreement between two individuals.
Exactly. It underscores the state's role in upholding the institution of marriage and ensuring its legal soundness. However, like any good legal framework, there are a few exceptions to this rule, and they are quite fascinating in their own right.
Oh, now this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about these exceptions to the marriage license rule.
Picture this. You're in a remote mountain village in the Philippines, miles from civilization, let alone a local civil registrar's office. The law recognizes that in such situations, requiring a marriage license might be impractical, to say the least.
So love conquers all, even bureaucratic hurdles in certain cases.
In a way, yes. This exception speaks to the law's ability to adapt to unique circumstances. Similarly, in cases of impending death, where time is of the essence, the requirement for a marriage license can be waived. These articula mortis marriages, as they're known, highlight the compassion inherent in the legal framework.
It seems even at life's most critical juncture, the law makes space for those wishing to formalize their union. Still, I imagine there are stringent requirements even in these exceptional circumstances.
Absolutely. The law, while flexible, is never to be trifled with. Take, for instance, the exception granted to couples who've cohabitated for 5 years without any legal impediments to marriage. This provision acknowledges the reality of long-term committed relationships that may exist outside the bounds of a formal marriage ceremony.
That feels rather progressive. It acknowledges that a marriage, in essence, can exist prior to any official documentation.
Precisely. However, the video makes it clear that this exception is not a loophole to be exploited. The case of Salado versus Saldo serves as a cautionary tale. This couple, hoping to sidestep the marriage license, falsely claimed to have cohabitated for the required 5-year period.
A classic case of faking it till you make it, but with potentially serious legal ramifications.
Indeed. The court, in its ruling, emphasized that the 5-year cohabitation exception is subject to rigorous scrutiny, and attempts to misrepresent the situation are taken very seriously.
So, honesty, as they say, is indeed the best policy. All this talk about exceptions and special circumstances makes me wonder, what happens when international couples enter the mix? The Philippines, with its unique stance on divorce, adds another layer of complexity, wouldn't you say?
You're spot on. When dealing with marriages involving foreign nationals, the legal landscape becomes even more intricate, especially when you factor in divorce. The Philippine stance on divorce, as you mentioned, is quite particular. While it remains one of the few countries globally that does not allow divorce for most of its citizens, there is recognition of foreign divorce decrees, albeit under very specific conditions.
That sounds like a legal tightrope walk. For couples navigating both their relationship and differing legal systems, what are some of the key considerations in these situations?
The video uses the example of a Filipino citizen married to a foreign national. Let's say the foreign spouse obtains a divorce in their home country. While that divorce is recognized as valid there, it doesn't automatically dissolve the marriage in the eyes of Philippine law.
So the Filipino spouse could potentially be considered divorced in one country and still married in the Philippines? That seems like a recipe for complications.
Precisely. This legal limbo highlights the crucial role of the Certificate of Legal Capacity for foreigners wishing to marry in the Philippines. This document acts as proof that they are legally free to marry, preventing individuals from unknowingly entering into unions that would be deemed invalid from the get-go.
A sort of green light for marriage, ensuring everyone is on the same page, legally speaking. What recourse, then, does the Filipino spouse have in this situation? Can they simply ignore the foreign divorce decree and remain legally married in the Philippines?
This is where things get particularly interesting. The Philippine legal system has grappled with this issue, and we've seen a fascinating evolution in how the courts interpret the law. A landmark case, Republic versus Manilo, significantly shifted the landscape in this area.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this game-changing case.
In the past, Article 26 of the Family Code was interpreted to mean that for a foreign divorce to be recognized in the Philippines, the divorce proceedings had to be initiated by the foreign spouse. This placed Filipino spouses in a difficult position, essentially at the mercy of their former partner's actions.
It seems unjust to penalize someone for a decision they didn't make. How did the Manilow case address this imbalance?
The Supreme Court, in a landmark ruling, recognized the inherent unfairness of this situation. The Manilow case established that it is unjust to hold a Filipino spouse captive to a dissolved marriage, particularly if they were not the party who initiated the divorce proceedings.
It seems like a victory for common sense and fairness within the legal system. Does this mean that Filipino spouses of divorced foreign nationals are automatically free to remarry in the Philippines?
Not quite. While the Manilow case set a groundbreaking precedent, there are still legal hoops to jump through. The Filipino spouse must petition the Philippine court to recognize their foreign divorce decree. It's not an automatic process. But the Manilow case paved the way for a more equitable and compassionate interpretation of the law.
So there's hope for remarriage, but it requires navigating the legal system.
Precisely. And to simplify this process, there's now a resource known as the OCA Circular Number 7, a boon for anyone dealing with the complexities of international divorce.
That sounds promising. Tell me more about this OCA circular and how it simplifies things.
Well, in the past, proving the legitimacy of a foreign divorce often meant obtaining and translating obscure legal documents from other countries. It was a bureaucratic labyrinth that could drain both time and resources.
I can only imagine the headache that must have cost.
The OCA Circular streamlines this process by compiling foreign laws on marriage and divorce. This compilation allows Philippine courts to readily access and verify the legalities of foreign divorce decrees, eliminating the need for individuals to navigate a bureaucratic maze.
It sounds like a win-win for everyone involved, promoting efficiency and clarity within the legal process.
Absolutely. The OCA Circular is a testament to the Philippine legal system's ongoing efforts to adapt to the complexities of a globalized world.
It's a reminder that even in something as seemingly rigid as the law, there's room for flexibility and progress. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the essential elements of a Philippine marriage to the nuances of international unions and divorce. What other critical insights does this video offer?
It circles back to something we touched on earlier, the concept of marriage as a special contract in the Philippines. The video really emphasizes the limited wiggle room couples have when it comes to setting their own terms.
Precisely. Philippine law draws a clear line in the sand about what marriage is and what it isn't. It's not a contract to be customized with clauses and caveats to suit individual preferences.
Exactly.
So no sneaking in clauses about how often someone has to take out the trash
Right.
or who gets to control the TV remote. No his and hers sinks enshrined in the legal document.
Afraid not. While prenuptial agreements do exist in the Philippines, their scope is generally limited to property relations. They can't be used to redefine the very essence of marriage as laid out by law.
So the law provides the framework, the non-negotiables, and individuals are free to build their lives within that structure.
That's a great way to put it. And it underscores the significant weight placed on tradition and societal expectations within the Philippine legal system, particularly when it comes to an institution as deeply rooted as marriage.
This deep dive has been incredibly illuminating. It's amazing to see the interplay between tradition, societal values, and legal frameworks in defining something as seemingly universal as marriage.
Indeed. And what I find particularly compelling is the Philippine legal system's commitment to striking a balance. On one hand, you have the unwavering stance on the permanence of marriage, the emphasis on tradition and process. Yet we also see a willingness to adapt to the realities of a modern globalized world. The Manilow case, with its focus on fairness and individual circumstances, exemplifies this beautifully.
It's a powerful reminder that the law, while often seen as rigid and unyielding, can evolve to reflect changing societal norms and values. So for our listeners, if you're considering tying the knot in the Philippines, remember this. Do your legal homework. Familiarize yourself with both the letter of the law and the spirit in which it's applied. But here's a final thought to ponder. As the Philippines continues to evolve on the global stage, how might its legal understanding of marriage continue to adapt, particularly concerning LGBTQ+ rights, which are gaining traction in many parts of the world? Something to keep an eye on as the Philippines charts its course for the future of marriage equality.